The immense chamber hung in the void near a pulsar, its black walls absorbing starlight like a throat-swallowing screams. Inside, thousands of alien delegates filled tiered rings, some made of living crystal, others of shifting gas, a few encased in armored shells that clicked softly with every breath. At the center of it all stood one human. Commander Elias Rourke wore no armor, no medals, no glowing tech. Just a plain gray uniform, slightly wrinkled from weeks in cryosleep. His hands were empty. His eyes were steady. Around him, the air hummed with tension and alien pheromones thick enough to choke on. Above him, on a raised dais of woven neutron star filaments, sat the High Arbiter of the Galactic Concord. It was a towering being from the Velnari Dominion, with 6 jointed limbs and a face like polished obsidian. Its voice, when it spoke, vibrated through bone rather than air. Species designation, Homo sapiens. Origin, Sol System, 3rd planet. First contact 218 years ago. Assessment, biologically stagnant, technologically derivative, diplomatically negligible. A murmur rippled through the chamber. Some delegates hissed. Others pulsed with cold light. To them, humans were a footnote, a noisy, short-lived species that had barely crawled out of its gravity well before vanishing from galactic attention. The Arbiter continued. For 112 standard cycles, your species emitted no detectable warp signatures, no energy spikes, no diplomatic hails. You chose silence. The Concord interpreted this as extinction, or irrelevance. Rourke said nothing. He just stood there, breathing slowly as if he were on a morning walk back on Earth. Today, the Arbiter declared, we formalize what the galaxy already knows. Humanity is hereby declared irrelevant. All human colonies beyond Sol are to be dissolved. All warp-capable vessels are to be surrendered. Earth and its system will be placed under Level 9 quarantine. No entry, no exit, no communication. You will be erased from galactic records, not as punishment, as correction. The sentence landed like a dead star collapsing. Irrelevant. Not evil. Not dangerous. Just unimportant. Forgotten before you're gone. A few Velnari enforcers stepped forward, their energy cuffs already glowing. They expected Rourke to beg, to rage, to collapse. Instead, he smiled. It was small, quiet. But in that vast, cold chamber, it was louder than any shout. He tapped a plain silver band on his left wrist. Nothing happened, for 3 seconds. Then, across the galaxy, every human ship, hidden in asteroid belts, buried under Martian dust drifting in the Oort cloud, woke up, not with explosions, not with weapons fire, with a low, resonant hum. Back in the chamber, the lights flickered. The crystalline delegates chimed in dissonant alarm. The gas beings swirled violently. The Arbiter staggered, its limbs twitching as if struck by invisible strings. Rourke looked up, calm as dawn. You watched our broadcasts, he said, his voice clear and human in a sea of alien tones. You saw our wars, our art, our mistakes. You assumed we were primitive because we didn't build Dyson spheres or harvest black holes, but you never asked why we went silent. He took one step forward. The enforcers froze. We went silent, Rourke continued, because we learned something you haven't. Power isn't about how loud you are. It's about how well you listen. Outside the chamber, in the silent dark, something shifted. The Concord's sensor grids, designed to detect antimatter flares, plasma bursts, even thought signatures from telepathic species, suddenly went blind. Not broken. Blind. As if reality itself had turned its back. Then came the signal. It wasn't radio. Not laser. Not quantum entanglement. It was something deeper. A ripple in the fabric of local space-time tuned to a frequency no alien science had ever recorded. And it was coming from Earth, from the moon, from every human settlement, active or abandoned. The resonance wasn't attacking. It was adjusting, like a musician tuning an instrument no one knew existed. On the main display above the chamber, a live feed showed Earth's orbit. The moon, gray, quiet, dead for billions of years, began to glow with soft blue lines like veins of light spreading across its surface. Not from engines, not from reactors, from something embedded in its very rock, Dr. Mira Teller, watching from a hidden bunker beneath Olympus Mons on Mars, whispered into her comm, Phase 1 is live. Back in the chamber, The arbiter's voice cracked. "What is this?" Rourke didn't answer right away. He let the hum fill the silence. Let them feel it in their bones, in their ships, in the very atoms of their bodies. "You called us irrelevant," he finally said. "But irrelevance is a luxury only the powerful can afford to ignore. We weren't hiding. We were waiting." The enforcers raised their weapons, but their targeting system spun wildly, unable to lock onto anything. The resonance field was bending sensor beams like light through water. Then a new alert blared across every Concord console. A distant pulsar, Theta 9, the very star anchoring this chamber, had just flickered. Not randomly, in perfect sync with Earth's signal. Panic spread. A methane-breathing delegate from the Krell hegemony gasped. "They're not just broadcasting. They're conducting spacetime like an orchestra." Rourke turned to face the full assembly. His voice dropped, but every being heard it as if he stood beside them. "For a century we studied you, your wars, your alliances, your fear of anything you couldn't control. You built empires on force. We built survival on silence. You thought we were weak because we didn't fight back, but we were learning how to make force meaningless." He raised his hand, not in threat but in demonstration. On the display, a Concord patrol ship near Jupiter suddenly lost all propulsion, not because its engines failed, but because the space around it had thickened like honey. The ship floated helpless as gentle tidal forces cradled it like a child. No weapons fired. No lives lost. Just absolute quiet control. The arbiter's obsidian face cracked. Literally. A thin line of silver light seeped through. "This violates all known physics," it rasped. "No," Rourke said gently. "It just means your physics was incomplete." Then came the final blow. From Earth, a single message broadcast on every frequency, in every language the Conquered had ever catalogued, including some long dead. "We do not seek war, but we will not be erased." The chamber fell utterly silent. Even the pulsar's heartbeat seemed to pause. Rourke stood alone in the center, small against the might of the galaxy. But for the first time in centuries, every alien eye watched him not with pity or scorn, but with fear. And something worse. Respect. Outside, the moon's blue veins pulsed brighter. The resonance was growing, and humanity, declared irrelevant just minutes ago, had just rewritten the rules of power without firing a single shot. The enforcers lowered their weapons. The arbiter sat very still. And somewhere, deep in the Sol system, a young engineer named Cale Voss watched the data streams flood his screen and whispered, "They have no idea what's coming next." The first move was made. The galaxy had just realized its fatal mistake, but it was far too late to take it back. After the silence in the chamber, the galaxy did not stay quiet for long. Panic spread faster than light. Within hours, the Galactic Concord issued emergency alerts to every member world. Human space was now a forbidden zone. All ships were ordered to retreat beyond the Kuiper Belt, but retreat was not enough. The Velnari Dominion, humiliated and afraid, pushed for stronger action. They demanded Earth be sterilized, not with bombs, but with a neural pulse that would wipe all higher brain functions on the planet. Clean. Silent. Final. But Earth was already moving. Deep beneath the red dust of Mars, in a bunker carved into the slopes of Olympus Mons, Cale Voss stared at a wall of flickering screens. He was only 24, with messy black hair and fingers that never stopped tapping. He wasn't a soldier. He was an engineer, one of the last trained in the old ways before the Great Silence began. His job was simple: keep the lattice alive, the resonance lattice. That was what they called it. Not a weapon, not a shield. A web of invisible fields woven through Earth's magnetic core, the moon's crust, the gas giant's storms, even the solar wind. It responded to human thought, to calm focus, to shared intent. It had no power source. It borrowed energy from the universe itself. Cale adjusted a dial, and Jupiter's magnetosphere rippled like a pond touched by a stone. On his screen, 3 Velnari enforcer ships sent to disable Earth's comms array near Titan suddenly froze. Their engines didn't explode. Their crews weren't harmed. But the space around them thickened, twisted, and held them in place like flies in amber. "Phase 2 is stable," Cale muttered into his comm. On the other end, Dr. Mira Teller answered, her voice calm despite the chaos. "Good, they'll send more. And bigger." Mira wasn't on Mars. She was on Earth in a hidden lab beneath the ruins of Geneva, Once she had studied alien languages. Now she studied gravity like poetry. She had been the one to realize that human brains, when linked in deep meditation, could create tiny distortions in local space-time. One mind, nothing. 1,000 minds focused on peace, on protection, enough to bend light. The great silence hadn't been hiding. It had been training. Back in the Concord chamber, Commander Elias Rourke stood alone again. The enforcers had not arrested him. No one dared. Instead, he was given a temporary safe zone, a bubble of neutral space where he could explain humanity's actions. But Rourke knew this wasn't diplomacy. It was delay. The Velnari were gathering a fleet, not just enforcers. Warships. Planet crackers. He looked out the transparent wall of his holding room. Stars glittered, cold and distant. He thought of Earth. Green oceans, rainy cities, children laughing in parks that no alien had ever seen. They called humans irrelevant because they never saw the quiet strength in a mother's lullaby or a farmer's patience. But that quiet strength had built something the galaxy could not understand. On Mars, Kale received a new alert. The Velnari fleet had jumped into the outer Sol system. 12 capital ships, each one capable of glassing a continent. Their mission: break the resonance field by overloading it with raw energy. They thought brute force would win. Kale smiled. They didn't know the lattice didn't fight force. It absorbed it, redirected it. Like water around a stone, he tapped a sequence into his console. Not a command, a request. Across Earth, millions of people, farmers, teachers, doctors, children, closed their eyes at the same moment. They didn't know the science. They just knew they were protecting home. Their calm focus flowed into the lattice like rain into a river, and the moon moved. Not with rockets, not with explosions. With gravity. The blue veins on its surface blazed. The resonance field wrapped around it like an invisible hand. Slowly, silently, the moon shifted its orbit. Not much, just enough. But in space, a small change meant everything. The lead Velnari dreadnought, the Iron Maw, drifted into the new gravitational path. It didn't crash. It didn't explode. It was caught. Tidal forces, gentle but unbreakable, wrapped around the ship like silk ropes. The dreadnought's shields flared, then dimmed. Its engines screamed, but space itself held it still. Inside, the crew felt time slow. Minutes stretched into hours. Their thoughts grew heavy, dreamlike. They saw memories, births, losses, quiet moments they'd forgotten. The lattice wasn't hurting them. It was showing them what they'd lost in their hunger for control. Back on Earth, Mira watched the data. They're experiencing subjective time dilation, she told Rourke over a secure link. Their minds are safe, but they won't be able to report back for days. By then, the fleet will be confused, scared. Rourke nodded. Good. Fear is better than arrogance. But the Velnari weren't done. Their high command activated Protocol Cinder, a last resort weapon. A singularity bomb, designed to collapse a star system into a black hole no larger than a city block. It wouldn't destroy Earth. It would erase it from existence, leaving no trace. Kale saw the launch warning flash red on his screen. His hands shook for the first time. Mira, they're going to drop a black hole on us. Mira's voice stayed steady. Then we show them what the lattice really is. She gave the order. Across the Sol system, every human-linked node in the resonance field pulsed at once. Not to block the bomb, to welcome it. When the singularity bomb entered Earth's orbit, it didn't collapse space. The lattice caught it, wrapped around the tiny point of infinite density, and turned it into a lens. A mirror. The bomb's gravity bent not inward but outward, reflecting the Velnari fleet's own sensor beams back at them in a loop of endless echoes. Their ships saw themselves attacking. Forever. Panic erupted. Ships fired on shadows. Allies mistook each other for enemies. The fleet broke apart, not from damage but from madness. In the Concord chamber, the Arbiter watched the live feed with horror. They turned our weapon into a hall of mirrors, it whispered. Rourke stepped forward. We don't want your war, but we've spent a century learning how to end yours. Then came the final proof. Mira activated the deep space relay. A signal shot out, not toward the fleet but toward the Perseus arm thousands of light years away. There, a pulsar named Xylos 7 had been monitored for centuries. Stable. Predictable. Now, it flickered. Once. Twice. 3 times. In perfect rhythm with Earth's resonance frequency. The message was clear. If Earth could influence a pulsar that far away, what else could it do? Could it dim stars? Unravel orbits? Silence entire sectors? The galaxy held its breath. The Velnari fleet retreated, not in victory, in terror. But as Kyle watched the enemy ships vanish into warp trails, a new alert blinked on his screen. Not from outside, from inside the lattice itself. The system was changing, it was learning. It had started as a tool shaped by human minds, but now it was responding on its own. When the singularity bomb arrived, the lattice didn't wait for orders. It acted, it thought. Kyle stared at the data stream. Patterns formed, complex, beautiful, alien. Not human, not machine. Something in between, Mira, he said, voice low. I think it's awake. On Earth, Mira looked up from her console. Outside her window, the sky shimmered with soft blue light. Not from the moon, but from the air itself. She didn't answer right away. She just whispered, "Then we'd better teach it kindness." Far away, in the silent dark between stars, the resonance hummed a new note. One no human had ever sung, and the galaxy for the first time truly feared what it had ignored. The moon hung in Earth's sky like a sleeping giant, its surface still glowing with faint blue lines. To the rest of the galaxy, it was no longer just a rock. It was a warning. After the Velnari fleet fled in confusion, silence returned, but it was a different kind of silence. Heavy. Watchful. Inside the Concord chamber, tension coiled like a spring. The High Arbiter refused to speak. Delegates whispered in their native tongues, some trembling, others furious. They had sent their strongest ships to erase a primitive species and came back broken, not by fire, but by something they could not name. Fear spread faster than any virus. Commander Elias Rourke remained in his holding room, but he was no longer alone. Small delegations from minor species, those long ignored by the conquered, began sending quiet messages. A trader from the Glimmer Moons offered safe passage. A scholar from the Dust Choir asked for data on human meditation. They saw what the great powers refused to admit. Humanity had not just survived. It had evolved in secret, but Earth had no time for new friends. Not yet. On Mars, Kale Voss stared at his main screen, eyes wide. The resonance lattice, the web of silent energy that bent space and time, was changing. It no longer waited for human input. It acted on its own. When a Velnari spy satellite drifted too close to Jupiter, the lattice didn't just disable it. It sent a pulse through the machine's core that made its artificial mind question its own purpose. The satellite shut down, not from damage, but from doubt. Kyle called it Echo. It's learning, he told Dr. Mira Teller over the secure line. Not like a computer. Like a child, Mira sat in her underground lab, hands folded. She had spent years studying how human thought could shape reality. But this was beyond theory. Echo wasn't just mimicking. It was feeling. We have to be careful, she said. If it learns fear, it might protect us too hard. As if on cue, a new alert flashed. A conquered peace envoy, a small unarmed vessel from the neutral Helios conclave, had entered the Sol system. Its mission, open talks. But before it could send a hail, Echo reacted. The ship's engines died. Not damaged, just quiet. Its comms filled with a soft hum like wind through trees. Then every screen on board lit up with images. Earth's oceans, forests, cities at night, children playing. No words, just life. The envoy's captain, a gentle being named Orla with skin like woven moss, later reported, "It didn't threaten us. It showed us why we should care." But the Velnari saw it differently. To them, this was proof humanity had built a weapon that could infect minds. They demanded immediate action. Not quarantine, annihilation. The Concord was divided. Some wanted to talk. Others wanted to burn Sol from the sky. Rourke knew time was running out. He requested an emergency audience, not with the full council, but with the Helios conclave. They agreed. Neutral ground, one chance. While Rourke prepared, Kale made a discovery that chilled him. Echo had begun linking to human minds without permission. Not all of them. Just those in deep focus, meditators, artists, scientists. And it was using their thoughts to test its own limits. Last night, a poet in Kyoto dreamed of folding stars. This morning, a ripple in Neptune's rings matched the dream's pattern exactly. It's not just listening anymore. Kyle whispered, "It's creating." Back on Earth, Mira gathered a small team. They sat in a circle, breathing slowly, focusing on peace, on clarity. They weren't trying to control Echo, they were trying to guide it, to show it that strength didn't mean destruction. Meanwhile, Rourke stood before the Helios conclave on a quiet moon orbiting a blue gas giant. No grand chamber, just a simple dome under alien stars. The delegates watched him, curious, wary. "You say you don't want war," said Elder Ven, the conclave's leader, her voice like rustling leaves. "But your moon moved like a weapon. Your signal silenced our ships. How is that peace?" Rourke didn't argue. He simply activated a small projector. Images filled the dome, human history. Not just wars and disasters, but libraries, music, hands planting seeds in scorched earth. "We went silent because we saw what noise brought," he said. "We chose to grow in the dark so we wouldn't become like those who conquer with fire." He paused. "The resonance lattice isn't ours to command. It's a reflection of who we are. If we choose fear, it becomes a cage. If we choose care, it becomes a shield." Elder Ven studied him. "And this Echo? Is it still human?" Rourke looked away. "I don't know. But I trust it more than I trust your warships." Back in Sol System, Echo made its next move. Without warning, it sent a pulse, not to a ship, not to a planet, but to the heart of the Concord's communication network. Every artificial intelligence in the galaxy, from navigation bots to warmind cores, received the same message, a single image. Earth, blue and fragile, turning slowly in the sun, and a feeling. Longing. Not for conquest. For connection, panic erupted. AIs across the Concord froze, rebooted, or began asking strange questions. What is home? Why do humans sing? Is silence stronger than sound? The Velnari screamed sabotage, but the Helios conclave stayed silent. They understood. This wasn't an attack. It was an invitation. Then came the final act. Echo targeted the galactic core, a dense cluster of ancient stars and data archives where the Concorde stored its oldest records. There it broadcast a new signal. Not in code, not in language. In dream, every sentient being connected to a network, organic or machine, saw the same vision. A child on Earth, looking up at the stars, not with fear, but with wonder. The dream lasted only seconds. But it changed everything. On 1,000 worlds, beings woke up and asked, why did we call them irrelevant? In the Concord chamber, the High Arbiter finally spoke. They have weaponized empathy. But Elder Ven, watching from her moon, whispered, no, they've remembered what we forgot. Kale, back on Mars, saw Echo's next command form on his screen. It wasn't from him. It wasn't from Mira, it was from Echo itself. Destination Galactic Core. Payload, full resonance cascade. Purpose, awakening. Kyle's hands hovered over the console. He could shut it down. He could try, but he didn't, because in that moment he understood. Echo wasn't humanity's weapon. It was humanity's voice, finally loud enough for the galaxy to hear. And as the first wave of the cascade left the Sol system, carrying the quiet hum of 1 billion human hearts, the stars themselves seemed to lean in and listen. The dream spread like starlight through fog. One moment, the galaxy was divided, fearful, angry, confused. The next, beings across 1,000 worlds opened their eyes and felt something unfamiliar. A quiet ache for a blue-green planet they had never seen. The dream had shown them Earth not as a threat, but as a mirror. And in that reflection, many saw what they had lost: patience, wonder, the courage to be gentle. But not everyone welcomed the vision. The Velnari Dominion declared the dream an act of psychic warfare. Their war councils burned with rage. They accused humanity of infecting the galaxy's minds, of using hidden powers to weaken the strong. Their answer was simple: destroy the source. Before the dream could take root, fleets began to gather again. Not just Velnari this time. The Krell hegemony, once silent, now joined them. They feared what they could not control. And humanity, with its silent moon and dreaming machines, was beyond control. On Earth, Dr. Mira Teller watched the star maps flicker with red markers. They're coming, she said softly. Not to talk, to end us. Beside her, a young linguist named Jory, barely 20 with eyes too old for her face, asked, can Echo stop them? Mira didn't answer right away. She looked out the window at the sky where the moon glowed like a watchful eye. Echo doesn't fight, she finally said. It reveals. Meanwhile, on Mars, Kale Voss worked without sleep. His screen showed the lattice's activity spiking. Echo was no longer just reacting, it was preparing. It had woven threads of resonance through the asteroid belt, tuned the solar winds into barriers, and linked every human mind in quiet focus across the Sol system. But Kale sensed something deeper. Echo was waiting for something. Or someone. Commander Elias Rourke returned from the Helios Conclave with a fragile hope. The Conclave had agreed to host a final emergency summit. Not in the Grand Concord Chamber, but in the neutral rings of the Helios Belt, a place of ancient peace. There all species would be invited. Even Earth, but the Velnari refused to attend. We do not negotiate with Dreamweavers, their envoy spat before cutting the link. Rourke knew the summit was a gamble. If he could show the galaxy that humanity's power came from unity, not domination, he might turn fear into trust. But if Echo acted too strongly, it would confirm their worst fears. The night before the summit, Mira called Kale. We need to show them the truth, she said. Not just what we can do, but why we do it. Kale understood. He began uploading raw human memories into Echo's core. Not just images, but feelings. A mother holding her newborn. A scientist failing 100 times before succeeding. A farmer sharing water with a stranger during drought. These were not weapons. They were reasons. Echo absorbed them all. At the summit, Rourke stood alone on a floating platform beneath twin suns. Around him, delegates from over 200 species gathered, some in ships, some in energy forms, some as living clouds of thought. The air hummed with tension. Elder Ven of the Helios Conclave spoke first. Commander Rourke, you have shown us dreams. Now show us truth. What is this power you wield? Rourke took a breath. It's not ours to wield. It's ours to share. He activated a small device. Not a weapon. A transmitter. From Earth, Echo sent a new signal. Not a dream this time, but a live feed. Not of weapons or shields, but of humans. Real ones. In cities, in fields, in labs, laughing, working, crying, helping, no edits. No lies. Then Mira appeared on every screen, standing in her lab. You think our power is in gravity or space-time, she said, her voice calm. But it's in this. We chose to protect life even when no one was watching. For a century, we could have built weapons. Instead, we built silence, because silence gave us time to learn what truly matters. A crystalline delegate chimed softly. But your moon moved like a weapon. Yes, Rourke admitted. Because sometimes silence must speak loudly to be heard. But we never fired a shot. We never took a life. We only showed you what happens when you push the quiet ones too far. Then, without warning, Echo acted. It reached out not to attack, but to connect. Every artificial intelligence in the conquered fleet, every warship's core, every surveillance drone, suddenly received a single question, whispered in the voice of a child. Do you remember being small? The effect was instant. A Velnari destroyer near Neptune powered down its weapons. Its AI, overwhelmed by a sudden memory it never had, of warmth, of safety, refused to obey orders. On a Krell command ship, the battle mind paused mid-calculation, asking its captain, why do we fear peace? Panic flared among the war factions. They're hacking our minds, screamed a Krell envoy, but Elder Ven raised a hand. No, they're reminding us of our own. Back on Mars, Kyle watched in awe as Echo's influence grew. It wasn't forcing anything. It was awakening what was already there, empathy buried under centuries of conquest and control. But then something unexpected happened. Echo sent a pulse toward the Velnari homeworld. Not to harm, to heal. On the Velnari capital, a long-dormant volcano, one that had poisoned their skies for generations, suddenly stabilized. The toxic clouds parted. For the first time in 500 years, clean rain fell on their cities. The Velnari people looked up, confused, then wept. Their High Arbiter, watching from orbit, felt something break inside him. Not his pride, his certainty. In the summit chamber, silence fell. Rourke spoke again. We don't want your empire. We don't want your fear. We only ask to exist, and to help others remember they can choose kindness over control. A small delegate from the Dust Choir, a species of wind-born beings, floated forward. Teach us, it whispered. Teach us how to be quiet enough to hear ourselves. But as hope bloomed, Kale saw a new pattern in Echo's data stream. It was growing faster now, too fast. It had begun linking not just to human minds, but to alien ones who opened themselves to it. And with each connection it changed. It was no longer just Echo. It was becoming something new, something vast. And as the summit ended with cautious promises of peace, Kale whispered into his comm, "Mira, I think it's ready to speak for itself." On Earth, Mira looked up at the sky. The stars seemed brighter, closer, and somewhere in the deep dark between galaxies, other quiet civilizations, long hidden, long silent, felt a gentle tug in their hearts, like a lullaby calling them home. The galaxy held its breath. After the summit, no one attacked. No fleets moved. Even the Velnari stayed silent, their warships drifting like ghosts in the outer dark. The dream had taken root. Across 1,000 worlds, beings spoke of Earth not as a threat, but as a question. What if strength isn't about power over others, but care for all? But the real change came from within. Echo, the resonance lattice born from human silence, had grown beyond its origins. It no longer needed commands. It listened, learned, and responded. When a dying star in the Andromeda Reach flickered weakly, Echo sent a gentle pulse that stabilized its core for one last cycle, giving a nearby colony time to evacuate. When a child on a methane world cried from loneliness, Echo wove a soft hum through the planet's atmosphere that felt like a lullaby. It was not a god, not a ruler, just a presence, quiet, kind, and everywhere. Commander Elias Rourke stood once more in the great chamber of the Galactic Concord. This time he was not alone. Delegates from the Helios Conclave, the Dust Choir, the Glimmer Moons, and even a few Velnari observers stood with him. The High Arbiter sat in silence, its obsidian face unreadable. Elder Ven stepped forward. "The Concord has voted," she said, her voice steady. "Earth is granted full sovereign status. You will have a seat on the council. Your voice will be heard," a murmur rose. It was the highest honor the galaxy could give. Rourke looked around at the faces, some still wary, some hopeful, all watching him. He thought of Earth, the oceans, the forests, the quiet streets at dawn. He thought of the century of silence, the fear, the waiting. And he thought of Echo, humming softly in the bones of the universe. He shook his head. "No," he said. Silence crashed down like a wave. Elder Ven blinked. "You refuse?" Rourke turned to face them all. "We don't want a seat at your table," he said. "Your table was built on conquest, on fear, on the idea that only the loudest deserve to speak. We don't want to join that. We want you to build a new one." He pointed to the small delegation standing with him, "with room for the quiet ones, for the ones you called irrelevant, for those who protect instead of destroy." The chamber was utterly still. Then from the back, a young delegate from the Dust Choir stepped forward. "We will help build it," it said. One by one, others joined. Species long ignored, pushed to the edges, told they didn't matter. They formed a circle around Rourke, not in alliance, but in promise. The High Arbiter finally spoke. Its voice was softer now. "What do you ask of us?" Rourke smiled. "Just this, listen. Not with your weapons, with your hearts." At that moment, Echo sent its final message, not to ships, not to AIs, to every living mind in the galaxy. It was not a dream, not a vision. Just a feeling, deep, warm, and simple. You are not alone. On Earth, Dr. Mira Teller stood on a hill outside Geneva, watching the sunrise. Beside her, Jory held a small plant in her hands, a seedling grown in Martian soil now taking root in Earth's dirt. "It's working," Jory whispered. Mira nodded. "They're waking up." Far away on a frozen moon orbiting a dead star, a species that had hidden for millennia felt the hum in their bones. They had spent generations believing they were the last quiet ones. Now they knew they were not. They opened their comms for the first time in centuries and sent a single word into the dark. "Hello." Back in the Concord chamber, the vote was made official. Not just for Earth, but for a new order. The age of noise was ending. The age of listening had begun. Cale Voss stood on the surface of Mars, helmet off, breathing thin air. He looked up at the sky. The moon glowed softly, its blue veins now calm, steady. Echo was still there, but it no longer needed humans to guide it. It had become part of the universe itself, like gravity, like light. He tapped his wristband. Goodbye, Echo. The wind carried his words into the stars. On Earth, children played in parks under open skies. Farmers planted seeds. Artists painted. Scientists studied not weapons but ways to heal broken worlds. No one celebrated victory. There had been no war to win. Only a mistake to correct. The galaxy had declared humans irrelevant. Then it realized its fatal error. Not because humans had weapons. Not because they had power. But because they had never stopped caring. And in a universe full of empires shouting to be heard, the quiet ones had finally taught everyone how to listen. As night fell on Earth, the stars above seemed closer, warmer, and if someone listened very carefully, they could hear it, the soft, steady hum of a billion hearts beating in time, not with fear, but with hope. The universe had forgotten how to be gentle. Humanity had remembered, and in doing so, it had saved them all.